Hi, I'm Marin. I drove across 3 states, alone, to surprise my sister on her wedding day. But the moment I stepped through the door, I heard her say to our dad, "I'm glad she didn't come. She ruins everything." They didn't know I was standing right there. But that was only the beginning. The lies, the silence. The years they erased me from our family like I never existed. Want to know what happened next? Drop a comment if you've ever felt like the outsider in your own family. And don't forget to subscribe. I'm not done telling the truth. The snow had already started to fall when I pulled out of my driveway. Not the soft, storybook kind that makes everything look peaceful. This was the thick, relentless kind that eats up visibility and makes the roads feel like glass. I hadn't told anyone I was going. No warning, no hint. I just packed a small bag, loaded the cake into the back seat, and hit the road like a woman on a mission. 13 hours. That's how long the GPS said it would take to reach Asheville. With the weather turning, I figured it would be closer to 15. I didn't care. I needed to do this. Every mile was a knot in my stomach. Every hour gave me time to second-guess myself. But I never turned back. The truth is, I wasn't just showing up for her wedding. I was showing up for every version of me who had been forgotten, dismissed, or quietly erased. I stopped only once, for gas and a cheap cup of coffee so bitter it made my teeth hurt. The guy at the gas station asked if I was driving through to visit family. I laughed. "Something like that," I said, and walked back into the storm. By the time I pulled into Asheville, my hands were stiff from gripping the wheel, and my legs ached from sitting too long. The sky was gray, nearly dark, and the town looked like one of those holiday postcards, all twinkle lights and fake smiles. I drove past the church first, white chairs lined up outside under a plastic canopy, and a giant sign read, "Welcome to the Harper Roswell wedding." Delara's new last name. I wasn't even sure I knew the groom's first name. The reception was at our father's house. The same house where Delara and I used to share bunk beds for 2 summers before Mom moved us away. I hadn't been inside it in over a decade, not since the day he looked me in the eye and said, "You've always been your mother's daughter." I parked down the street, took the cake box out from the back, and started walking. My boots sank into patches of wet snow. My coat wasn't heavy enough. My arms burned from holding the cake steady, but I kept walking. The front door was cracked open. People were laughing inside. Music, soft jazz spilled out. I stepped onto the porch and wiped the snow off my boots, took one deep breath, and walked in. No one turned to greet me. Not a single head turned. For a second, I thought maybe I had the wrong house. But no. That was Delara's voice, sharp and clear, commanding attention like she always did. I slipped into the hallway, trying not to make noise. I caught sight of her in the dining room, radiant in white, surrounded by friends and family. Champagne in her hand, glowing like someone who had finally crafted the perfect life. She didn't see me. I paused, unsure of what to do next. Should I call out? Should I hand off the cake to a caterer? And then I heard it. "Honestly, thank God she's not here," Delara said, her voice cutting through the chatter. My chest tightened. "Who?" someone asked. "My sister," she scoffed. "Marin, the drama magnet. I swear if she showed up, I would have walked right out of my own wedding." A few people chuckled. One guy said, "Didn't she move to... where was it? Michigan?" "Wisconsin," Delara replied. "And yeah, we don't talk, for good reason." I stepped back behind the wall, gripping the cake box tighter. My fingers were numb, but not from the cold anymore. Another voice joined in, one I recognized too well. Our father. "Well, she's always had a knack for ruining things. Your mother should have kept her on a tighter leash." Laughter again. My whole body went hot. Not with embarrassment, but with something colder, denser. I turned, walked toward the kitchen, and set the cake box gently on the counter. My hands were shaking now. I didn't unwrap it. Didn't place a card on it. I just left it there like a body and made my way back out the way I came. Outside, the wind had picked up. My face stung as I walked toward the car. I didn't look back. Not once. By the time I turned off the main road and pulled into the neighborhood, the snow had started sticking to my windshield like dried tears. I parked at the end of the block, far from the driveway packed with shiny SUVs and rented luxury sedans. My hands, stiff from gripping the wheel for so long, fumbled the cake box out of the passenger seat. The cold didn't sting anymore. It just reminded me I was still alive. I adjusted my scarf, steadied my breathing, and began walking toward the house like someone who had every right to be there, because once I did. The lights strung across the porch glowed with a perfect warmth, artificial and curated like everything else Delara had ever touched. Through the windows, I could see people I didn't recognize, men in tailored suits, women with sleek hair and perfect posture. They looked like extras in her dream life. I wasn't part of the script. I was the deleted scene. The closer I got to the door, the louder the noise became. Clinking glasses, bursts of laughter, someone singing along badly to a jazz version of a pop song. I stood on the welcome mat for a second, blinking through the sound, the lights, the freezing air. Then I pushed the door open. No one looked up. I stepped inside, the warmth of the foyer hitting my cheeks hard. I wiped my boots on the rug. Still, nothing. A man in a navy suit brushed past me without acknowledgement. 2 women in satin dresses stood by the staircase, whispering and glancing over their shoulders. Not at me, but just past me. I wasn't invisible. I was irrelevant. I walked through the hallway, cradling the cake like an offering to a god I didn't believe in. I passed framed portraits along the wall, smiling faces of Delara and our father, vacations I was never invited to, moments I had no memory of. I felt like I'd stumbled into a museum exhibit called The Family You Didn't Make the Cut For. Near the back of the house, I found the kitchen. It was spotless. There was a charcuterie board arranged in a symmetrical spiral, bottles of champagne chilling in a silver bucket, gold utensils laid out like props. Everything had been curated for beauty, not for belonging. I placed the cake down gently, careful not to disturb anything. I stood there for a moment, staring at it. It was her favorite. Chocolate mousse from a bakery she once cried over when it closed for renovations. I'd driven 13 hours through black ice and whiteouts to bring it. She wouldn't even know. I heard her laugh then, from the other side of the wall. That laugh, high and confident, as if she were the star of her own reality show and the rest of us were there to applaud. Someone clinked a glass and shouted for attention. I heard her say, "To chosen families!" and the room erupted in cheers. I turned back toward the hallway, but before I could leave, a woman with a clipboard stepped into my path. "Hi there, I just need to check names before you go any further," she said, with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Marin," I replied quietly. "I'm her sister." She blinked. "Oh, She scanned the list. Her smile tightened. "I'm not seeing you here. Do you know which table you were assigned to?" I shook my head. "I wasn't assigned one. I wasn't invited." That made her uncomfortable. She pressed her lips together and said, "Let me double-check with the coordinator. Could you just wait here a sec?" "No need," I said. "I'm not staying." I walked past her before she could protest, past the sounds of celebration that weren't meant for me, past the foyer, past the reminders, back into the cold, back to the car. I sat in the driver's seat for what felt like an hour, but probably wasn't more than 10 minutes. My phone buzzed in the cup holder. I looked down and saw an Instagram notification. Delara had just been tagged in a story. I opened it. The video was shaky, filmed from across the room. In the background, someone murmured, "Is that her sister?" Then the voice changed. A cousin I hadn't seen in years spoke over the video. Everything was perfect, until someone showed up uninvited with cake. I stared at the screen. Among the first likes, Delara. Not even a heart emoji, just cold, silent approval. I locked my phone without responding. You see, that cake wasn't just dessert. It was everything I hadn't said. It was every holiday I wasn't invited to, every secret family trip I only found out about through tagged photos, every phone call my father never returned. It was me showing up. It was my presence, literal and undeniable. And they threw it away. I didn't mean to go back inside. I had already left. I was already at my car, already gripping the steering wheel with white knuckles. But something inside me, maybe pride, maybe foolish hope, whispered that I should at least retrieve the cake. Not to salvage the moment, but to salvage myself. So I walked around the side of the house, past the icy flower beds and melting patches of snow, and slipped through the back patio door. The kitchen was quiet now. The crowd had moved on, probably raising toasts in another room. The cake was still sitting untouched, as pristine as when I had placed it. I stared at it for a few seconds, considering whether to pick it up or just walk away again. That's when I heard their voices. I froze, mid-step, standing just outside the kitchen entrance, behind a wall half draped with silver streamers. Their tones were casual, relaxed, like they didn't have a care in the world, like they had no idea I was still in the house, close enough to hear everything. "She has no idea how exhausting she is," Delara said. Her voice didn't sound angry. It sounded amused. "She's always been that way," my father replied. "Even when she was a kid. Moody, dramatic, like she wanted the world to revolve around her just because she felt left out." Delara laughed. "Honestly, I was relieved when I thought she wouldn't come. She ruins everything. Weddings, birthdays, even Mom's funeral felt like a performance when she showed up." "She should have stayed in Wisconsin," Carver muttered. "Your mother should have taken her and left. Would have saved us all a lot of stress." Another burst of laughter. I didn't breathe. My body felt like glass, thin, brittle, ready to shatter at any second. I had thought I was numb before. I had no idea how much further there was to fall. My mind went blank, like the moment right before a car crash, when the world slows just enough for you to register the pain coming but not avoid it. That kind of silence, that kind of stillness. I could have walked in. I could have thrown the cake across the room or screamed. I could have made a scene so memorable it would have haunted every dinner table conversation for years. But I didn't. I just stood there, listening to them talk about me like I was some bitter aftertaste they couldn't quite rinse out of their mouths. The smell of roast chicken and expensive candles clung to the air around me, but all I could smell was memory. One in particular surfaced like a bruise breaking through skin. I was 10 years old. It was our grandfather's 75th birthday. The whole family was there, back when they still pretended I belonged. I had been holding a glass of orange punch, one of those flimsy plastic cups they give to kids at big events, when someone bumped my elbow. The punch splashed across the white carpet. I immediately bent down, trying to clean it with napkins, but my father was already looming over me. No warning, no words, just the sharp sting of his hand across my cheek, right there, in front of everyone. No one said a word. Delara looked away. My stepmother clucked her tongue and started dabbing at the floor. I just stood there, red-faced and stunned, trying to figure out whether the sting or the silence hurt more. That was the first time I realized love in our family came with disclaimers, and I didn't meet the fine print. Back in the present, I stepped back quietly, careful not to make a sound. I left the cake where it sat, an offering that had never been meant for me to give. I walked through the kitchen side door and out into the night. My boots crunched softly on the snow. No one followed. No one called after me. By the time I got to the car, I felt hollow. Not angry, not even hurt, just stripped of whatever illusions I still had left. I turned the key, but didn't start the engine. Just sat there, staring at my reflection in the rearview mirror. No tears came. Only the words did. "Your mother should have taken her and left." As if I had been a mistake that should have been erased. An inconvenience they had all just tolerated until now. I thought about all the years I tried to earn their affection, sending birthday cards, visiting when no one visited back, biting my tongue when they made their backhanded comments about the Wisconsin girl. For what? I glanced at the house one last time. Through the windows, I could see silhouettes dancing, hugging, celebrating. And yet, it had never felt more like a funeral. I turned on the ignition, and the dashboard lit up in a dull orange glow. My fingers trembled on the steering wheel, but I tightened my grip. I wasn't driving home yet, not tonight, but I was done being the girl they could dismiss and forget. I didn't drive straight home. I couldn't. Instead, I pulled into the nearest budget motel just off the highway, one of those places where the vending machine hums louder than the heater, and the front desk clerk doesn't ask questions, just slides you a key card like they've seen this kind of heartbreak before. The fluorescent lights in the bathroom were brutal. No filter, no forgiveness. My dress was wrinkled and clung to me like a reminder of my mistake. My face looked older, harder, the kind of face you see on a woman who stopped asking why and started asking what next. I peeled off my jacket, laid it over the lone chair by the window, and sat on the edge of the bed. The mattress groaned beneath me. I wanted to scream or cry or maybe both, but instead, I reached for my phone. Part of me hoped, stupidly, desperately, that someone had reached out. Maybe one of my cousins, maybe even Delara herself. A message saying, "I saw you. I'm sorry. You didn't deserve that." But no. The notifications that greeted me weren't apologies. One was a story posted by a cousin I hadn't spoken to in years, one of Delara's inner circle. A quick video of the reception hall, full of candles and clinking glasses, captioned, "Everything was flawless until someone tried to make it about herself, with cake." Underneath it, a comment, "So embarrassing, Lamau." And there it was, Delara's name, bold as ever. She'd liked it. I stared at the screen until the light blurred into a halo. It didn't matter that the story would disappear in 24 hours. It was already seared into memory. I closed the app, threw the phone on the bed, picked it up again a second later, biting my lip. I scrolled to Ella, my youngest cousin, the only one who ever seemed to live on the edges like I did. I typed, "Did you know I wasn't invited?" Her response took almost 5 minutes. Then, "I thought maybe it was just a misunderstanding." I waited. Then a second message came through. "Delara didn't want you in the photos. She told the planner. She said you'd throw off the look." I didn't respond. I just stared at the words until they stopped making sense. Throw off the look, as if I was an accessory that didn't match her dress code, as if my presence was some kind of aesthetic offense. I stood up too quickly. The room tilted slightly, and I grabbed the curtain to steady myself. I needed air, but there were no windows that opened. Just the hum of the heater and my own shallow breathing. I walked to the small table near the sink where I'd dropped my overnight bag. Dug through it until I found the old family photo album I'd brought with me, something I hadn't looked at in years. I'd packed it in a moment of nostalgia, maybe even weakness, thinking it might bridge the distance between us. I flipped through the pages slowly. Thanksgiving. Delara posing with our father and stepmom, arms wrapped tight, smiles picture perfect. I remembered standing in the corner that year, holding a pie I had baked. I wasn't in a single frame. Christmas, cousins gathered around the tree, matching pajamas. I had taken the photo. Spring break at Myrtle Beach. I had planned the trip, booked the Airbnb, even made the playlist. No trace of me. It was like I'd been photoshopped out of my own life. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't about one wedding. This wasn't even about one night. They had been writing me out for years. Quietly, cleanly. No fights, no drama, just silence. Just omission. The kind you don't notice until there's nothing left of you. The rage came like a whisper. Soft, steady, impossible to ignore. I wasn't angry because they hated me. I was angry because they never cared enough to say it. They just erased me. Erased me from memories, from photos, from conversations, from family threads and future plans. This wasn't forgetfulness, it was strategy. I looked down at my phone again. Still no messages, no missed calls. Just a screen reflecting back a version of me I barely recognized. A woman halfway through a breakdown or a breakthrough. Maybe both. So I did the only thing I could do. I opened the Notes app and started writing. Not to them, not for revenge, just for me. I wrote everything I remembered. What they said, what they didn't say. The look on Delara's face when she toasted to chosen families. The ache in my chest when Elle told me the truth. The burn in my throat when I realized I wasn't in any of those photos. I wrote until my thumbs ached, until the room grew quiet around me, until the things I'd kept buried started to form their own language. No one had silenced me. I had been silencing myself. But that stopped tonight. I wasn't going to beg them to see me anymore. I was going to make damn sure they couldn't ignore me again. The motel room was still dark, the only light coming from the glow of my phone screen. My thumbs hovered over the keyboard, the words already pressing against the back of my teeth, demanding release. I didn't name anyone. I didn't rant or lash out. I simply told the truth, my truth. What it feels like to grow up in a family where you're treated like a distant relative rather than a daughter or a sister, where birthdays pass without a call, where you become an afterthought in your own lineage, where the people who share your blood act like your presence is an inconvenience and your absence a relief. I didn't write for revenge. I wrote to survive. To anyone who's ever shown up knowing they weren't wanted, just to remind themselves they existed. I see you. I read the post twice before hitting send. Then I put the phone down and let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding for years. At first, there was nothing. No vibration, no likes. Just the same stillness that had followed me from Asheville to this room off I-40. But a few minutes later, the first notification came in, then another. By the time I brushed my teeth and pulled my sweater tighter around my shoulders, the post had over 20 likes and a dozen comments, all from strangers. That was me too. My sister did this to me on my wedding day. I thought I was crazy. Thank you for saying this. By sunrise, it had over 1,000 shares. Some messages made me laugh. Some broke my heart. But all of them said the same thing. You're not alone. That truth held me like a blanket as I sat at the rickety desk in the corner of the room. I pulled out the small box I'd packed with a few of Mom's old things, her journal, a gold locket I hadn't worn in years, and an envelope. The envelope. Cream-colored, worn at the corners, folded so many times the crease had started to tear. I opened it again. The handwriting was hers, messy but full of warmth. Marin, if you ever feel like you don't belong, read this. You are not someone to be tolerated. You are someone to be treasured. I know you don't always feel that way in our family. I see the way they overlook you, the way they speak around you, not to you. That's their failure, not yours. You don't have to prove your worth. You just have to remember it. I love you, Mom. I ran my fingers across the ink, as if I could feel her hand still there. That letter had sat in the back of my drawer for years, buried under bills and broken pens and forgotten plans. I used to read it only when I felt weak. But today I read it and felt strong. I folded it carefully and tucked it back into the box. Then I stood. Same motel, same room. But I wasn't the same. I walked to the mirror and stared at myself, not to judge, but to recognize. I was no longer chasing anyone's permission to exist. I wasn't asking to be included. I wasn't auditioning for a role in someone else's script. I was rewriting the whole story. The phone buzzed again. A friend request, from a woman I didn't know. Another message. If this is about Delara, she's got some nerve pretending she's the victim. And another. This is heartbreaking, but powerful. I didn't respond to any of them. I didn't need to. The post was doing the work. The silence that used to bury me was now speaking volumes. Delara hadn't said anything publicly, but I saw her name tagged in more than a dozen comments, some gentle, others not. This sounds like you, Delara. If you're the sister in this story, you owe her more than an apology. Yikes. Family like this is why people go no contact. I didn't comment. I didn't add a single word. My silence wasn't compliance. It was control. The internet had its own way of forcing truth to the surface. It didn't need me to pour gasoline on the fire. They were already lighting the matches. I closed my phone and set it aside again. The calm in the room wasn't peace. It was a pause. The stillness before a wave. And for the first time in my life, I didn't fear it. I was ready for it. By mid-morning, I was sitting on the edge of the motel bed, the box of my mom's letters by my feet, and my phone clenched in my hand. A quiet vibration buzzed across the nightstand. Another notification. But this one didn't come from a stranger. It came from someone I used to call a friend. Hey, this video's everywhere. Is that your sister's voice? I didn't answer. I just stared at my phone, thumb hovering over the screen. What had started as a casual voice memo, something to remind myself to pick up wine, gas up, maybe grab mints, had unknowingly captured everything. The moment I walked into the kitchen, the laughter, the insults, the betrayal, all of it, tucked neatly into a 36-minute file. I hadn't listened to the full thing until now. I sat there, replaying it with my earbuds in, hands trembling, heart pounding like I was back in that hallway. The cruelty in their voices wasn't vague or out of context. It was deliberate, surgical, and worst of all, it wasn't even new. They sounded comfortable talking about me like that. She ruins everything. She should have never been invited. I was hoping she wouldn't show up. I sat with it for hours. My breakfast went cold. I ignored the checkout time reminder from the front desk. The audio file stared at me like a weapon I hadn't asked to hold, but now couldn't unsee. And then I opened my notes app, Wrote 6 words. Sometimes the silence isn't imagined. Attached the audio file. Posted it to the same platform where I'd written the message that went viral the night before. I didn't tag anyone. I didn't even name names. But I didn't need to. Within 20 minutes, the comments started flooding in. That laugh. I know that voice. This is heartbreaking. If this is who I think it is, wow. I turned my phone over and stared at the ceiling, trying to breathe through the adrenaline crawling up my neck. And then, like someone had poured gasoline on a quiet flame, someone reposted the clip under a trending thread. Funny how some people preach family values online and then treat their actual family like trash. They dug up an old podcast interview Dilara did a year ago. She was on a segment about authenticity and family branding. I remember that episode. She'd texted the family chat afterward. Well, not my chat, clearly, gloating about how many downloads it got. On the clip now resurfacing, she said, clear as crystal, "We're a tight-knit family. We support each other. That's what love looks like." Underneath that, someone commented, "Is this the same woman who laughed when her sister brought her a cake across 3 states?" I felt my stomach twist, not in regret, but in something close to awe. They heard me. They finally heard me. As the hours passed, things snowballed. My DM inbox exploded again. Not just from strangers, but now from mutuals, people in Dilara's social circles, people who had once politely smiled at me from across dinner tables and bridal showers, pretending not to notice the silence. This is upsetting. I never knew it was that bad. I'm so sorry I didn't say anything. Her brand sponsors started quietly untagging her from posts. A popular influencer who had once collabed with her posted a vague story. "We don't support performative kindness around here. Family first, right?" Then came the friends, the ones who'd stood beside her at the wedding altar. They weren't defending her. They were going quiet. And for once, I wasn't the one left behind in silence. I didn't comment. I didn't explain. I didn't share follow-ups or updates or long emotional threads. The recording was already doing all the work. It said more than I ever could. And strangely, I didn't feel vindictive. I didn't even feel triumphant. What I felt was clean, like I'd opened a wound to air and it had finally started to breathe. That night, while Dilara's name trended in whispers and accusations, I drove to the edge of town and parked overlooking the city lights. I played the podcast clip again, not out of spite, but to remind myself. This was the mask they wore, the performance they clung to. But masks eventually slip, and when they do, the silence they weaponized becomes the one thing they can't control. They erased me from their story, but now the world was writing me back in. I woke up to a storm, except this time it wasn't outside. It was online. My post, the recording, Soraya's statement, they'd all lit a match and Dilara was scrambling to contain the flames. I didn't even have to look for it. Her face was everywhere. My feed, my inbox, even on the motel TV looping through morning talk shows. She sat in a cream-toned room surrounded by fresh lilies, her favorite. A stylist had clearly prepped her for this moment. Soft waves, dewy skin, that calculated quiver in her voice. "There have been misunderstandings," she began, eyes shimmering with just the right amount of gloss. "My sister and I, we've always had a complicated bond." I sipped my lukewarm coffee and let the words wash over me like static. Not once did she say sorry, not for the things she said, not for the things she did, just an apology for how people might have felt. Classic. Gaslighting in HD. But the worst part? People believed it. The comments beneath her video were a war zone. "She's being so vulnerable. Give her a break. She's clearly heartbroken. You can see it. You can't blame her for everything." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Because while they were busy playing defense for Dilara, another voice was preparing to speak. "Soraya," her message came in quietly just before noon. "I know I should have spoken up earlier. I was there. I heard the audio. I stayed silent because it was easier. But it was wrong. I'm sorry, Marin." I stared at my screen, not breathing. Soraya had been Dilara's best friend since high school, their maid of honor, the one who toasted their sisterhood in front of hundreds, and now she was walking away. A few hours later, her post went live. No tagging, no names, just conviction. When you stay quiet while someone is being erased, you become part of the erasure. I'm done being silent. The reaction was immediate. Comments poured in, resharing Soraya's words. A subtle but seismic shift. The narrative, once shaped by Dilara's polish, was unraveling. And that's when Dilara panicked. She started leaking receipts, childhood photos of me mid-scream, screenshots of old texts, stories exaggerated beyond recognition. She's always had issues. She was jealous of any attention I got. She once locked herself in the bathroom for hours after I won an award. I didn't deny it. Some of it was true. I had struggled. But context matters. I had been the forgotten one. The child of the first marriage, the one shuffled between homes, never quite belonging in either. I wasn't unstable. I was hurt. And now she wanted to weaponize that pain against me. So I didn't counter with accusations. I didn't launch a rebuttal video. I didn't cry into a live stream. I wrote. Just a sentence. When they lie, I write. Then I dropped a link. Erased. Growing up as the family's inconvenient truth. The blog post was simple, honest. I detailed moments not of scandal, but of absence, of birthdays skipped, of text chains I was removed from, of being cropped out of Christmas cards so the color scheme stayed consistent. I didn't name names. I didn't need to. The people who knew. And the people who didn't? Well, they started to understand. Emails followed, messages from women across the country. You told my story. I thought I was the only one. This made me call my sister for the first time in 10 years. My words had become a mirror, not just for me, but for strangers, for every woman who'd ever been pushed aside, blamed, rewritten. But even in that rising wave of validation, the undertow of Dilara's retaliation continued. She appeared on a podcast, trying to spin things again. Families are messy, she insisted. You try to protect your peace, and suddenly you're the villain. They gave her 30 minutes. I gave the world my truth in less than 10, and still, mine echoed louder. Because her image was breaking. That pristine, curated life she'd built, followers, sponsorships, motivational speeches, was now shadowed by one inconvenient reality. The sister she pretended didn't exist finally had a voice. I didn't need to be in their family photos. I was already on a million strangers' screens, being seen. And in that, I found something she'd never offered me: recognition. By the time the applause died down from the last chapter of my online post, I'd already closed the laptop. Not because I was avoiding what came next, but because I was finally done performing for people who never even took their seats. I didn't need their applause. I had something more lasting than that: peace. A week later, the invitation came. Not from anyone in my family. Not a single cousin or aunt or apologetic father reaching out. No, this came from a woman named Melanie from Northwestern University. She'd read my blog, forwarded it to her colleagues, and now she was asking me to speak at their annual panel on healing from invisible family trauma. For a second, my stomach tightened. Speaking publicly meant reliving it all. Out loud, to strangers. But the moment passed, and what replaced it was calm. I replied yes. 2 weeks later, I stepped out of the airport shuttle into the biting Chicago wind, gripping a small carry-on and a memory stick with my slides. The sky was heavy with snow, and the conference building loomed like something out of a documentary, modern, cold, honest. That night, as I stood backstage, microphone being clipped to my collar, I looked at my reflection in the glass. Not a polished speaker, not a perfectly dressed survivor, just me. I began my talk with a line I never thought I'd say. I used to believe that being quiet made me noble, but silence can feel a lot like being erased. I didn't name Dilara. I didn't mention my father. I just told the truth. I told them about being the daughter from the first marriage, about holidays where my name was never on the ornaments, about that orange punch stain and the slap that no adult in the room questioned. I told them about driving 13 hours just to prove I existed, about holding a cake like it was a peace treaty no one signed, about hearing my name spat out like a burden. And I ended with this: I thought showing up would earn me love. Turns out walking away earned me peace. The audience didn't clap at first. They sat in silence, and for once it wasn't suffocating. It was sacred. Then came the applause. Long, staggered, real. Backstage, I found 20 unread texts from unknown numbers, journalists, bloggers, event organizers, but none from Delara, none from my father, and that was fine. The silence didn't feel like punishment anymore. It felt like distance I had earned. Of course, Delara didn't stay silent for long. That night, she posted on her social feed again. It's sad when people capitalize on pain for attention. I'll always believe in family, even when others try to destroy it. Her voice was tight this time, too controlled. The comment section didn't rally behind her like before. The top liked reply simply read, "Then maybe you should have protected your sister instead of your image." And just like that, the mask began to peel again. This time, no one was rushing to fix it. The next day, I did something I never thought I'd do. I signed a lease. A small studio in Chicago near the river, tucked above a used bookstore that smelled like ink and history. The landlord was a soft-spoken woman who didn't ask why I was moving or what I was leaving behind. That evening, I unpacked the one box I'd carried across states. A few clothes, some books, and one old photo frame. Inside was the last family photo I ever kept. I stared at it for a while. My body was cropped at the edge, only half my face visible. Like even the photograph wasn't sure I belonged. I slid it out of the frame and into the recycling bin. In its place, I pinned up a quote I used to hide in my closet drawer. "Some homes are built on love. Others you must leave to find it." I stood there, barefoot, watching the snow fall through the window, thinking that maybe I wasn't lost at all. Maybe I had finally arrived. Later that night, my blog inbox pinged. A new message. "You saved me. I was going to visit my family this Thanksgiving and let them tear me apart all over again. I read your words, and I changed my mind." I stared at the screen, hand covering my mouth. Not out of shock, but out of something deeper. Gratitude, release, and for the first time in years I cried. But not because I was broken, because I was free. Chapter 9. Closure isn't a door they open, it's one you close yourself. Character count 3,923. I stood by the balcony of my apartment that morning, a cup of tea in one hand and a watering can in the other. The ivy in the corner had begun to green again. Spring was arriving, not rushing in, but gently, as if asking for permission to stay. It mirrored how I felt inside. There was still a trace of chill, but warmth had finally found its way back. I didn't realize how long I stood there until my phone buzzed on the windowsill beside me. Unknown number. I didn't need to open it to guess who it was. The pattern had always been the same: reappear, not to reconnect, but to regain control. I let the notification sit there. No anger, no anxiety, just stillness. I didn't delete the message, didn't block the number. It didn't deserve that level of effort anymore. Later that day, a brown envelope arrived from my mother's estate attorney. It was the final package, belongings that hadn't been sent before because they were mistakenly listed under Delara's claim. Inside, wrapped in velvet, was the bracelet. Delara and I had fought over it years ago. Not because it was valuable, it wasn't, but because it had belonged to our mother's mother, the one person who had loved me with no fine print. I remember Delara once saying, "You're not even really her bloodline. Why do you care so much?" I wore it that night, not out of vengeance, but as a reminder that I belonged to myself. 2 days later, a letter slipped through the mail slot, handwritten, no return address. I recognized the handwriting immediately. Soraya. It was short, uneven, real. I didn't just enable Delara, I benefited from the lie. Your courage made me confront my own silence. I lost a lot, but I got myself back. Thank you, Soraya. I folded it gently and placed it in the drawer next to my mother's last letter. Not to read again, but to remember what honesty looked like in ink. That weekend, I opened my laptop to check on the blog. Not for likes, not for stats, just curiosity. A new message blinked in my inbox. "My name is Emily. I didn't crash the wedding, but I left mine. My family blamed me for everything. My silence, my absence, my pain. I thought I was going crazy until I found your post. That's when the shaking stopped." I replied immediately. "You're not alone anymore." The message was brief, but that one sentence carried everything I had longed to hear for most of my life, and everything I had now learned to say to others. A month later, I returned to Asheville. I didn't go to the house. I didn't stop by the venue where the wedding happened. I didn't walk past the bakery, though part of me thought about it. I simply walked through the town, quiet, unnoticed, whole. I had no need to confront the past anymore. It had already played its final act, and I had taken my bow, not for applause, but for peace. When I returned home that evening, I hung a new photo frame above my desk. It wasn't a picture of my family. It was a snapshot I had taken in the motel room that night, of the chocolate mousse cake, slightly melted, sitting alone on the table by the window. Tilted, lopsided, still wrapped in its bakery string, but beautiful. Beneath it, I added a caption in gold lettering. She came, she saw, she left, she healed. That was my ending, not the one they wrote for me, the one I chose for myself. Sometimes, the loudest healing happens in silence, not when others finally say sorry, but when we decide we no longer need them to. Marin's story reminds us that family isn't defined by blood or obligation. It's defined by respect, truth, and the freedom to walk away when love becomes conditional. Have you ever chosen peace over being right or over being included? We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. And if this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. We've got more powerful stories coming, stories that heal, confront, and inspire. You won't want to miss what's next.